And thank you for bearing with us as we get going. And thank you so much for helping us out here. They've taken everything we've had, not just from us, but from our fathers and our fathers' fathers. And what have they ever given us in return? The aqueduct and the sanitation. These are two things that the Romans have done for us, but apart from that, what have they done? And the roads, well, the roads go without saying. Irrigation, medicine, education, health, and the wine. Ah, the wine. All right, but apart from better sanitation, and medicine, and education, and irrigation, and public health, and roads, and a freshwater system, and baths, and public order, what have the Romans done for us? Now imagine those lines in a funny British accent. Does anyone know those lines? Monty Python, The Life of Brian. The story of a Jewish boy who grew up next door to Jesus and mistaken for the Messiah. And in this scene, a group of conspirators, and I can't remember if it's the People's Front of Judea or the Judean People's Movement or Front, they're gathered in a room attempting a plot against the Roman Empire. And it was mentioned this morning, but this scene reminds me of the folks out in Oregon who took over the National Wildlife Refuge and ended up pleading for people to send supplies via the United States Postal Service. This sentiment expressed over the ruling authority taking everything away or being taxed to death was a very real threat for first century Israel. And it's why Jesus' relationships with characters like Levi and then even the one who became his disciple and proclaimed gospel writer Matthew, it's why these were so disturbing to people. Under Roman rule, tax collectors could walk right up to somebody, tax him for what he was wearing or carrying or selling, and much more. The tax collector was considered the most despised and disgusting of the sinners. They taxed who they wanted, and they had brute force to back them up. And they were allowed to keep a sizable percentage of what they took in, so you can imagine the temptation for abuse. These tax collectors were hated and despised, not only for what they took, but for who they were. Usually fellow Jews who worked for Rome. And here in our text today, Jesus wining and dining with Levi and his friends. So what about this guy sitting in his tax booth? He was probably like you and me, or a first century version of you and me. Working hard at his job, probably had a family, maybe kids. Maybe he was the life of the party, a great neighbor, maybe even generous at times. And the taxes that he collected from the provinces to administrate the Roman Empire, paying for all those things listed earlier, that good system of roads and law and order and security, religious freedoms, a certain amount of self-government, other benefits. Does Levi think of himself as evil? Probably not. Perhaps he even sees Rome as a great force of civilization. And who knows what barbaric nation could be trying to come and conquer Israel if it wasn't for Rome there with its great army and treasure and blood protecting this fragile desert nation. And no merchant could be collecting and making money without a stable economy or currency or justice system or enforceable contracts. All of this costs money. I even had a question raised by a resident Roman history scholar back in the corner there. That if Rome was so evil, why would God allow it to rule over Israel? Our world is set up and tempts us into black and white answers, good versus bad, for or against. This notion that success comes from wealth, that tells us failure is losing, that failure is not an option, that death is the final note, and yet we are drawn to this banquet table, opening us to glimpse God's kingdom of an often upside-down perspective it reveals through the gift of grace. Jesus calls Levi to get out of the walls of his booth and follow him, and bam! A banquet is prepared with all of Levi's friends, who most likely happen to be tax collectors themselves. Why? Why would he eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? And Jesus states, those who are well have no need for a physician. Those who are sick. I've come not to call the righteous, but the sinner to repentance. Jesus' words kind of sound like that radio spot for the Washington Post. If you don't get it, you don't get it. If we don't understand the celebration expressed by Levi and his friends at this communion with Jesus, we don't understand grace that is abundant and overflowing and transformative. If we can't understand the need to let out all that we carry and weighs us down in life, then we can't understand the forgiveness and love that is the gift of grace. And if we can't understand and recognize the pain and suffering inflicted on this world in our actions and inactions, in the brokenness of community, in the destruction and the injustice, then this generous and unexpected and freely given divine gift of grace will continue to find new life in those who are invisible or disregarded or cast out, those Levites and tax collectors of the world. There, the Spirit and grace will stir up the movement of the Spirit to open and begin a banquet where death is overcome. We all have tales to tell. The time and place in life where we are matters. We are made in the image of God, burdened by lives lived in the flesh, but moved by the grace to walk and move in life of the Spirit. We carry pains and wounds that have been afflicted upon us, and all that we have afflicted on others. We say things the wrong way. We hurt people with our words. We misunderstand situations and hold grudges and become embroiled in turmoil. We dig holes that we seem impossible to get out of. We twist ourselves up in knots. Avoid conflict for self-preservation. We're human. And if we fail to see this about ourselves, then we can end up lining up next to the Pharisees in this story. None of us will be able to stand before a perfect and holy God in our own righteousness. It's God's glory and power and presence that can bring a person to their knees. Sometimes it takes that despised tax collector to bear witness to this gift, to understand and see this before any upstanding, polished religious person, one who sees no need to seek God's forgiveness. Each of us have been called by name. We've been invited to step out of the booths that we reside in, to follow the one who gives the despised dignity, who brings light to darkness, who brings new life out of death. We step out of that booth to follow the one who knows us inside and out, and still continues to give us this incredible gift. Here, this is for you. I love you. how can that not transform us and spring open renewal and restoration of hope? How can we not throw a banquet at the sound of that? Amen.
Amen.